In the late 80s and 90s, Konami was seeing great success from their 2D Castlevania series. Inevitably, the series had to make its leap into the 3D world. Castlevania went 3D in 1999 on the N64, 2 years after Symphony of the Night on PlayStation 1, a game fans consider to be the best in the series. GameSpot states Symphony of the Night is easily one of the best games ever released and a true testament to the fact that 2D gaming is not dead by any stretch of the imagination. A follow-up to Symphony of the Night was doomed at inception, especially a 3D one. Castlevania 64 was that first 3D Castlevania on none other than the N64. It released to mostly positive reviews, contrary to what you might hear today, and it's a game I personally enjoyed, even acknowledging many of its flaws, with GameSpot again saying the developers have done a fantastic job of capturing the atmosphere and the spirit of the series, with a challenging gameplay experience that's filled with pretty visuals, awesome music, and some incredible bosses. Other reviewers bashed the N64 title for failing to execute what made the perfected 2D games great. The same can be said with the sequel on N64, Castlevania Legacy of Darkness. A mediocre sequel, one which I never played, but from what I understand rehashes a lot of the first game without innovating on much else. With 2 failed 3D Castlevania games, Konami set out again on the PlayStation 2 for a way to refresh the 3D titles. Enter Koji Igarashi. As a child in Fukushima Prefecture in Japan, Igarashi would visit Komain Castle, not too far from where he lived. He discovered a love for video games after playing Crazy Climber at his local arcades. He designed many of his own amateur games after teaching himself computer programming languages, eventually landing himself a job with Konami. He started off at Konami programming enemy AI for Datani Twinbee, and later was tasked to write the story for dating sim Tokimeki Memorial, where he would often play Castlevania Rondo of Blood on his breaks. After the success of Tokimeki Memorial, he asked if he could be placed on the Castlevania development team. The rest is history. He played major roles in the success of many of the 2D Castlevania games that fans hold dear, including assistant director to Symphony of the Night. Next, as the game's producer, Igarashi was to work on a new 3D Castlevania titled Castlevania Lament of Innocence, or Lament of Innocence. I have no idea. A game he intended to be a new starting point for the series, doing away with the unsuccessful N64 3D games. So think of this as a fresh start. Now Igarashi could apply what he learned making good 2D Castlevania games into creating a quality 3D Castlevania, simply titled Castlevania in Japan, but titled Castlevania Lament of Innocence here in America. Igarashi originally intended for the game to take place in one interconnected castle, but that proved too difficult to accomplish, so he separated the game into several areas, with puzzles contained within each area, similar to how Mario 64 did it, by jumping into the worlds behind paintings in Peach's castle. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when you think of games like Symphony of the Night or Super Metroid, where being able to backtrack the entire game is a thing, Lament of Innocence feels immediately dated in that regard. I don't think it affects the game's fun factor though, because each contained area is well designed and thought out. Each area taking about an hour or two to solve, depending on how much you're willing to discover in each area. In addition to each area's overarching puzzle, there will sometimes be additional weapons like the Ice Whip to find by going out of your way by jumping onto new areas clearly not laid out for you, with the reward always being some kind of power-up or item. Let me say, these were nearly impossible for me to find, and secret items that I did find were done so by accident. The hard to find secret items would be my biggest complaint about the game, but I could totally see how this promotes multiple playthroughs of the game. There were times I wrapped up the area's puzzle and was ready to exit, but couldn't because I just knew I was forgetting something. So I told myself I'd be back later for the missing upgrades, but I never did, which honestly was fine with me because all I ever needed was my trusty whip to get through the game primarily, with the cross sub-item being a close second. Yeah, you got your Castlevania sub-item classics here, with the knife, crystal, holy water, axe, and cross as available sub-items for you to use alongside your whip. Another great addition are the whip combos you unlock throughout the game just by fighting and trying new things. Once you find the new powerful combo that works for you, the fighting does become irresistible. And that's the most important thing in an action game like this, the combat, which doesn't disappoint here. You have your square button for light whip attacks and triangle for heavy attacks. You can mix and match light and heavy for some slick looking combos. There's a block move available, but I barely use that. Instead, I went for the dodge move to stay out of enemy paths, which late in the game you unlock a double roll dodge move, which allows for lots of mobility during combat. I mean, you unlock it later in the game, which I noticed is a thing with other cool abilities like the talisman, for example, that occasionally negates damage from enemy attacks, which is always cool to see activate. But hey, if you choose to replay the game with the new Game Plus mode, you'll retain all those abilities, which is nice, in addition to the 2 new playable characters you'll unlock when you beat the game. The story in Lament of Innocence is a simple one, as it serves as the origin story for which the Belmont family remains in an eternal war against Dracula. Our main character, Leon Belmont, is informed that his lovely Sarah has been kidnapped and is being held captive in the castle of vampire Walter Barnhart. Man, that sounds familiar. Once Leon arrives at the castle, he is greeted by Ronaldo Gandolfi, who just so happens to live 20 feet from the castle and also just so happens to like the cut of Leon's jib enough to enchant Leon's gauntlet with the power to use relics inside the castle. And yup, Ronaldo just so happens to have the soon-to-be vampire killer whip. You guessed it, he gives it over to Leon as well. For an origin story, everything seemed so convenient and rushed in order to get Leon in the castle right away. Sure, it's an action game and Castlevania was never much for story to begin with, but for some reason I thought I'd be given more of an incentive to care about these characters. Instead, I was left feeling no attachment to anyone, an aspect I felt Igarashi took the lazy way out on. He even states, "I wanted to create a proper 3D game with Lament of Innocence," in regards to the new starting point for the series. He goes on to say, "For future games, I would like to do something more. So perhaps we'll see some improvements to the series in the game's sequel, Castlevania Curse of Darkness, which I have and I will be doing a full review on. On that note, I really hope they improve the music. It's not that the music was bad in this game, but it's just that I'm so used to the Castlevania series having memorable tracks in almost every stage. The music in Lament of Innocence felt more like forgetful background noise, with the exception to one track, which I don't even want to risk playing for you because of the YouTube rules against music. Just know coming into it to expect mediocre Castlevania tunes that serve the levels well, but don't do much to enhance the experience like older games do. I hate to sound so harsh about the music, but I expected more. Igarashi and his team did a great job with the game's style, however, absolutely nailing the gothic themes of Castlevania past and pushing the aesthetic far beyond what I expected for a 3D game. Everything's here, the candles, cathedral glass designs, and a dark yet colorful atmosphere throughout the game, which mixes things up for the player. Sure, some hallways are reused here and there throughout areas, but I felt it added to the lonely castle feeling of the game. Leon's character model is well detailed, with silver armor accented by his red and white overcoat. Every inch of the castle is filled with elements of Gothic design, even outdoor areas and underground areas. I love varied level design, and it's something I missed in today's games. I definitely took that for granted back in the day. What more can I say? It's not the most elaborate game in terms of exploration, especially if you compare it to games like Devil May Cry or Resident Evil, which require a lot more backtracking and memorization to advance. Instead, Lament of Innocence has a get-right-to-it approach, which caters to quick play sessions. Let me know what you think of the game if you've ever played it, and what I might have missed in this review. There's tons more items and secrets that I didn't cover, as to not spoil anything. With that being said, I had tons of fun with this review. Let me know if you enjoyed the retrospective style of this review. I tried diving deeper into the history of Castlevania to make it more interesting. I look forward to speaking with you in the comments. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.